It's a new world that we're living in, and if you're an art teacher looking for lesson plans to teach your students remotely, I've got some great ideas for you. Hello there everyone, Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and right now teachers all over the world are scrambling to figure out ways that they're going to be able to teach their students remotely, and art teachers especially, because we have special needs as art teachers. Obviously we need to have special materials. There's a special set of instructions that we need to give our students, a special set of skills that we need to teach the students as well. Our jobs are probably a little bit more difficult than your average teacher. But in this video, I'm going to share with you several ideas to get you started at least in teaching your students remotely. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first idea is what I'm calling a virtual art museum scavenger hunt. Now, there are several museums out there that have created virtual tours, and I think this is in collaboration with the Google Art Project. I'll leave a link to that particular website below this video in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching this on the blog, of course, it'll be listed underneath this video as well. What you can do is essentially create a number of artworks that you want students to find in these particular museums. Students will go on a virtual tour, they'll find the particular artworks, and they get the experience of virtually being in that particular museum. And of course, they're getting exposed to the artists and artworks that are in these museums as well. Now, not all of the museums offer a virtual tour. When you're looking through these museums, you need to look for the museums that have a little icon of a golden person in the lower right-hand corner. And by clicking on that icon, it will take you to the virtual tour of that museum if that particular museum offers a virtual tour. Now, of course, your students are going to need to have internet access to do this, but most students these days do have a device that they can use and also internet access. So the first idea is a virtual art museum scavenger hunt. All right, so the second idea is a futuristic linear perspective drawing. Now, linear perspective comes in three forms: 1-point, 2-point, and 3-point perspective. Of the bunch, 1-point perspective is the most simple, 2-point perspective is a little bit more complex, and 3-point perspective is definitely the most complex of the bunch. Now, with this particular assignment, you would assign students to create a drawing of the future using 1-point, 2-point, or 3-point perspective. Now, of course, this would probably end up being a cityscape, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a cityscape, just that it uses 1-point, 2-point, or 3-point perspective. Now, based on the age group and skill set of your students, you might choose to make it a little bit simpler and say that they can use 1-point perspective, or you can make it more difficult if you have older students and assign them 2-point or 3-point perspective. Now, when I used to do this project with my students, I would always assign it to 9th and 10th grade students, and they would create a futuristic perspective drawing using colored pencils on toned drawing paper. Now, I know in a situation like we're in right now, your students might not have colored pencils at home, and they most definitely won't have colored drawing paper. So you can just have them use ordinary graphite or even pen and ink to complete this assignment. Now, if you're unsure on how 1-point, 2-point, and 3-point perspective works, or you're unsure of how you're going to teach your students those concepts, I have lessons, free lessons on all of those concepts, and I'll leave links to those lessons in the description below this video if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're watching this on the blog, of course, I'll link to those lessons below this video as well. Now, the third idea is what I'm calling a community mosaic drawing. Now, in order to pull this off, you will need to have some type of graphics program like Adobe Photoshop or perhaps the free program called GIMP. What you would do is you would take an image of perhaps a community landmark. In this example, I'm just going to use an image of the Statue of Liberty. You would take this image and break it down into a number of squares. Make sure you have at least one square for each student that you teach. You would take these little smaller squares, these little smaller segments of this larger image, and email this particular image to each one of your students. So each student would receive a different little section of this overall image. Have the students complete their little square on an 8-inch by 8-inch piece of paper. Now, this could be typing paper or printer paper or even drawing paper if they have it, using either colored pencils, oil pastels, crayons, or whatever they may have at home that's a colored medium to finish it. Once all the students are finished, they can either email you back their little square and you can piece them together using a digital manipulation tool like Photoshop or GIMP, or you can wait until you reconvene with your students in the future after all of this virus mess is behind us, and you can put all of those little squares together to create this huge, wonderful piece of art that all of the students worked together to create. Now, this is also an opportunity for you as a teacher to teach the importance of working together. Of course, we're going to need to work together to get through this virus mess together. Throughout this whole process, we need each other for this. And this assignment will not only show the students how they can contribute to something that's bigger than themselves, but also how they can be involved in creating a large, wonderful piece of artwork as well. So again, I'm calling this one the Community Mosaic Drawing. And again, you do need to have some type of photo manipulation software in order to pull this off. And it may take a little bit of time for you to do this, but it's going to be worth it for your students, especially during this time when they need to feel a part of something and part of some sort of community. All right, idea number 4 is a crayon etching. Now, a crayon etching is very easy to pull off. It doesn't require a huge amount of materials, and it's time consuming. Now, you can do a crayon etching with a variety of ages. I'd say probably the youngest age you could do this with is 4th grade, but you could do this all the way up to the age of seniors in high school as well, depending on how you set the parameters for this project. Now, the basic process of creating a crayon etching includes creating a preliminary drawing first with just a graphite pencil, just drawing the contour lines. Now, of course, we need a simplified drawing for this, so you can think in the same terms as like a coloring book. Then you would use a Sharpie or a thick marker and trace over the outlines or the contours of the simplified drawing that you created. Now, that's important that you use a thick marker here, and you'll see why in just a moment. Then you're going to cover up the drawing with colorful applications of crayons. Now, these applications need to be very, very solid. They need to cover all of the little white specks of the paper completely. You want a lot of wax on the surface. Now, when I typically do this assignment with students, I had them cover the surface using carbon black India ink after they've applied the crayons. Now, the carbon black India ink is easily removed from the surface during the etching process, and it leaves a nice sheen. But of course, your students are probably not going to have carbon black India ink at home to cover their crayon etchings with. So an alternative to using the ink is just using a black crayon. You go right over the top of that layer of colorful crayon goodness that you've applied initially with the black crayon. Then the students use a sharp tool like either the end of a paper clip or a wooden skewer that you can pick up at the grocery store. Then you scratch out patterns, and wherever you scratch out the pattern there, the color underneath shows through. Now, of course, whenever you get to a point where you can't scratch off the pattern, that's usually an indication that you've run into one of those ink lines that you applied with the Sharpie marker. So in the end, you create a wonderful, colorful image that's filled with all different types of patterns. Now, of course, you can teach rhythm, repetition. Of course, you can teach pattern with this particular assignment. And if you need a little bit of a refresher of how this works, or if my explanation was too quick and not thorough enough, I do have a lesson on creating a crayon etching. And again, I'll link to that lesson in the description below this video. And again, if you're watching this on the blog, the description will be a little bit further down this page as well. Okay, so now the 5th idea is really more aimed towards older students, and that is creating a series on isolation. Now, all of our students right now, ourselves included, are dealing with isolation. And one of the best ways to deal with, or one of the ways that we can deal with the emotional issues that come up in our lives, is to create art. You know, we're artists, so it only makes sense to create art about the things that concern us. And your students are no different. You know, they're artists too. And this is a perfect opportunity for you to encourage them to create art around things that are pertinent to them at the time. And right now, of course, our students are dealing with isolation, so it's a perfect opportunity for you to use this theme to give them assignment give them an assignment so that they can create around this particular theme. Edward Hopper would be a great artist to talk about if you do decide to give this assignment, because a lot of his artworks, you can kind of see a little bit of an undertone of isolation in them. You can share examples, of course, with with your students and encourage them to create their own artworks dealing with isolation. Now, of course, you'll have to keep the mediums open. Some of your older students might have materials like acrylic paints at home and canvases and so on, but some of them might not. So you can also give them the opportunity to use whatever medium they feel suitable to work with for this particular series. All right, idea number 6 is really for any student that's old enough to use a phone, a cell phone, or an iPad or any other tablet like that, and that is to create a stop motion animation movie. There are a ton of apps out there that are free that folks can download and put on their tablet or their phone and use those apps to create fun little stop motion animations. Of course, this is going to teach students about the process of animation. It'll allow them to get a little bit creative, maybe encourage a little bit of some cinematography included in that as well. If you want to give the students a theme, of course, you can definitely do that. But when all of the students are done creating their videos, they can send them to you and you can post them by combining them all together to create one longer video, of course, using a video editing program. Or you can just wait until this mess is over with and we all come back together in the end and you have a screening, a showing, a opening premiere of all the students' movies that they made when they were home, isolated in their homes, creating these stop motion animation movies, of course. And it'd be a fun event. You can serve popcorn. You can invite the principal, the assistant principal. It'd be a really cool thing to do, of course, and that's creating a stop motion animation. And again, there are several different apps that are available out there that you can use. I will link to at least 1 or 2 of those apps below this video in the description below, or a little bit further down on this page, of course, so you can check those out. All right, the 7th idea is pretty obvious, but you can just have your students work in their sketchbooks. Of course, you can give them several different ideas on how they can work in their sketchbooks. If you don't have your students working in sketchbooks right now, you really should already. So now's a perfect opportunity for you to have them to start working in their sketchbooks. You can give them a certain number of sketches that they have to complete, of course. And this is in addition to the assignments that you give them, of course. Back when I was in the classroom, all of my students had to create, my advanced students had to create 25 sketches in their sketchbook every quarter. So at the end of the year, they had filled up a 100-page sketchbook. Of course, if you're looking for ideas, I've got you covered there too. I have a post with 101 drawing ideas, and some of those ideas actually link to lessons as well. And I will link to that post in the description below this video and also a little bit further down this page as well. So these are just some ideas to get you started. Now, these are some trying times for sure. This is uncertain territory that we're in right now, but we will get through this. We will get through this together. And I'm doing everything I can to help out. Last week, I released 25 hours of content that's usually only for members. If you missed that video, I'll link to it in the description below. I've got a lot to link in the description here in this video. And I'll also link to it somewhere on the screen right here, so you can go check out that video. That's 25 hours of art lessons on a variety of material and subjects that you can just straight up link to for your students if you need to. Now, this content is going to be for older students, of course. If you're stuck at home and you're not a student or a teacher, of course, you're welcome to check out that content as well. It's completely free and open to everyone, at least during the time period where we're dealing with this virus. We're also going to go back in and revamp some of the ultimate lesson plans that we've done in the past. We have a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers there. And we're also going to be adding more lesson plans to that collection as well. That's always been planned to add more lesson plans to that collection, but now we have a little bit more motivation to do that a little bit quicker than we did before. So we're going to be shifting some of our focus in the coming weeks to adding more of those lesson plans and revamping those older lesson plans, and also making them a little bit more modern, adding some more videos and so on. So we're going to be helping you along the way. You're not in this by yourself. We're going to get through this together, and I'm going to be helping you guys out along the way as well. So stay safe, stay healthy, and I wish you all the very best in your artistic success.